to everyone. We have an amazing panel of women who will talk to us about their experiences with competition. As we listen to what they have to share with you, you might find yourself thinking about those times where you had similar experiences around competition. We hope that these conversations will enlighten you and help with knowing that we are not all alone. We all have very similar experiences, whether it's at home or on the job when it comes to competition. Competition is something that happens to all of us, but it's really the understanding of how we approach it and knowing that all competition is truly not bad. There could be healthy competition out there, but then there could be other experiences where it may not be as healthy. Okay, that's enough for me. I want to have our four panelists talk about their experiences, how they feel about competition, what it means to them, and if they feel whether there is some type of healthy competition out there. I want to thank all of you guys again for coming and volunteering to talk to us about competition and about your experiences. I am very honored, along with AAWC, to present our four panelists, Noi John, Morwari John, Zakia John, and Sana John this evening. We are so excited to hear about your experiences and what you have to share with us. So with that, before we start, we want to get to know you guys a little bit. Noi John, would you mind giving us just a quick introduction about yourself? And in addition to that, in addition to telling us a little bit about yourself, can you tell us one word that you can describe about competition? What does competition mean to you in one word?
Sure. I'm going to go with what competition means to me. It means human nature. My name is Nahid Fatahi. I'm an adjunct professor at Pacific Oaks College, teaching psychology. And I'm a MFT fellow at Kaiser Permanente.
Thank you. Sure. What about you, John? Would you mind going next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so in addition, John used the word I was going to think of as well. That's probably why we're such good friends. I would build, in addition to human nature, and I would say insecurity. And for a little bit about myself, I'm in the 209, so in the Stockton-Tracy area, and I am a public servant to local government.
Thank you. Zakia John.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zakia. I'm from Los Angeles, and just like you, Marwa did, I also work for local government here in the mayor's office in Los Angeles. In addition to that, I'm also a part of the AAC organizing committee. And if I were to describe competition in one word, it would be fun.
And Sana John.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum everyone. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sana Shamidi. I am a mother, a wife. I live in New Jersey, and I'm an attorney. If I was to describe competition in one word, it would be inspiration.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for doing that. All right, well, let's go ahead and start with the fun part. What does competition mean to you all? What about you, John? What does competition mean to you?
So I think in its most basic form, it means to compete with one another. However, I think it's way more complex than that. You know, as we've kind of touched on, it's not only necessarily a negative thing. I think it also can be a positive trait to have. And so it's really how you respond to it, I think, that is the key. And so it's something that I think is innate within all of us. And really the key is just how you respond to it.
Agreed. Definitely agree with that. No, John, what do you think?
As I mentioned earlier, it is truly a part of human nature. It's a personality trait and a form of social behavior in which people in competition, basically, we are rising to challenge. And you can almost look at it also as a survival mode. So I don't know, I look at it from that lens and from that perspective. And of course, there is much more to it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I like how you said people can look at it in a survival mode. I never necessarily looked at it that way, but I can see how that can that could definitely affect it. Zakia John, what do you think?
Yeah, building off of what they shared, I think, competition is an opportunity for me personally to push more myself towards a larger goal. And my reaction often kind of goes in one of two ways. It could either be a chance to have fun if I think the stakes are low and it's like, I'm playing a board game and I become that person that no one wants to be on their team, because I do get really competitive and take it far more seriously than I should. Or it could be something where it's, instead of being a fun process, it's actually a little bit more intimidating. And that's because, I think that there's a chance that I might fail at what I'm doing, right? If there's only, if success is defined or limited to a number of people or a specific outcome, and I take that challenge upon myself, then I do get a little bit scared because I'm either competing with myself or another group for something that's a little bit more limiting. And that fear can potentially hold me back from even entering that competition.
Yeah. I like how you said it could be fun. It is playing games or whatnot. It is fun competition. And so I 100% agree in that it's not only to look at it in a different angle. So definitely agree. Thank you all. Let's go to the next one. Can you share some experiences, either personal or work related, where you felt you were competing with another woman? Sana John, would you mind?
Yeah, so I had one such experience this past year with my son's friend's mother. And both my son and his friend, they're both really good students. They have a lot in common. And my son speaks highly of this friend. So naturally, I was looking forward to meeting this mother. And so we're at an event and another parent mentions, hey, that's so-and-so's mother. So I get up excitingly to go introduce myself. Before I could even tell her my name, she cuts me off to tell me, oh, I know who you are. And then within minutes of the conversation, she starts giving me a breakdown of her entire day, how she wakes up at 4 a.m. every day. And 4 a.m. she wakes up to work out 2 hours a day. Then she practices the violin with her children. Then they read. Then she gets them ready for school, gets herself ready to work, goes to school, picks them, she goes to work. Once they're out, picks them up, goes to all the different activities that they're going to, the extracurricular activities that their kids are in, and she made a point to let me know that they thrive in it. They come home, eat dinner, do homework, go to sleep, do it all over again. And then she asks me, okay, what activities does your son do? And when I told her that, we just do one sport a season just to kind of keep it low key, and that's all I could really handle, her face was like a certain way. And you could tell like this woman was in full on competition with me. And I guess she felt victorious in that moment. And I was embarrassed to admit it, but that conversation affected me. And even days and weeks after it, I questioned whether I worked enough, whether I was a good enough mother, and the mommy guilt was kicking in. Like, am I holding my children back? So that was definitely one experience that sticks out in my mind as far as competition with another woman.
Did you learn anything from that experience?
So looking back on it now, I'm really grateful that I had this experience because it gave me an opportunity to learn something about myself. I realized that I had insecurities within myself. And one thing that stood out for me is a book that I had read, and it's titled Enough as She Is. And I highly encourage it to any female from the middle school up until college age or parents of daughters. And within it, the author says that these days, because a woman can't be anything, we feel like we have to be everything. Mm-hmm. And I realized that I had done this to myself. I had this whole perception when I graduated law school that, my kids are young now, but in a few years, I'm going to have like this dream career, and I'm going to be a perfect mother and a perfect wife, and my house is going to be spotless. And I wasn't at any of that points right now. And so what I did is I stopped comparing myself to this woman, took a moment to reflect on who I was and what I have accomplished. And then I re-examined my interaction with her, and instead of using her as a comparison, I used her as an inspiration, because mashallah, it is remarkable to be able to have kids, to be thriving, a full-on career, have time to work out and play the violin. Like, that's amazing, mashallah, you know? So from that, like, now whenever I feel like, oh, I can't do this, I don't have time for it, I remember this woman, and she inspires me till this day to push me to make time for things that I find that are important to me, bring me joy, and that are good for my family and for my career as well.
Yeah, you brought a lot of good points as far as the whole mommy guilt piece of it. And wanting to do, you see all these people doing all these different things for their children, and social media really doesn't help with that either. They're doing these crafts, and they're doing, they're taking to all these sports, and they're doing, the school and this and that. And like, you're sitting here feeling not accomplished in really anything. Yeah. And so when truly, like you said, I mean, there's so much that you're doing, that is just being able to learn maybe some best practices from them is great. But seeing it in a different way. So that's a lot of great points that you brought up, and a lot of learnings that you got from it is amazing. Thank you, Sana John, for sharing that with us. Noe John, any experiences, work related or personal, that you can share with us?
Sure. I mean, I think we all, including me, have faced competition. Either we were competing with other people or others were competing with us. And it can happen in small capacities that the effect does not seem as profound. In fact, if it is a healthy dose of it, it can really encourage people to do better. I think I can really relate to what Sana was just sharing with us on motherhood and competition. Because in today's society, we are not just mothers. I'm a mother. We are also working women. We go to school. We thrive for more and more. And so we have all these different roles that are very important to us, to our identity, to our lifestyle, and so on. I think for me, to use myself as an example, whenever I have a few friends who are very accomplished women, but they have chosen to take time off from work altogether, and their entire focus is their children, meaning they drop off their children to school, they pick them up, take them around, spend a lot of quality time with their kids. I don't have that luxury because I chose not to have it. That said, also when I do sometimes see them, being there for their kids, especially picking them up from school, I don't know. I don't want to say I feel jealous, but I wish that for myself. I'm like, I should do that. But then knowing myself and working in this field, I also know that that is not possible. So with my husband, I mean, we try to do our best to, drop off the kids, pick them up, and spend maybe not so much time with them, but the time that we do get to spend with them, we really try for those times to be of quality and substance. So, yeah.
So I'm going to ask the same question I did of Sana John. John, did you learn anything from some of these experiences that, you see your friends or other family members picking up their children, or maybe, that because of some of those luxuries that they have, you may not have, and so you're not able to do that. But what are some of those learnings? And you may have, talked about some of them, but any other learnings from some of these experiences?
The learning really goes back to the basics of it. it's a matter of choice. It comes back to my choices. I choose to work full time, and they don't, and I should just really leave it at that and understand that maybe our ambitions or maybe our lifestyle or maybe our choices are very different from one another, and just accepting that those little facts are, I think, very helpful in how I feel about myself. At the end of the day, I do my best with my kids and they do their best, and we may be very different, but I guess we both are doing our best, and
Absolutely.
a good job, hopefully. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what factors in those interactions that you had made you feel like you were competing or that you were in a competition with them?
Again, I think for me it was more of just like competing with myself more than with them, if that makes sense. In fact, with my work, I mean, I scheduled my work somehow. So let's say on Mondays, I have the luxury to go and pick up my kids, take them home, feed them, and then go back to work. See what I mean? So I made that happen. So now it's 4 days a week that my kids go to a after school program. But again, my kids are a little bit older, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, the competing really is, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna make it work for me personally?
Thank you so much, the both of you. I'm going to jump to something different. How has culture influenced competition in your life, and has it spilled over into your professional space? So with that, Jen, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, so that's a great question. When I think about how to answer this, I think there's a couple caveats because, what culture is to one person might be different to another person. I think overall, in terms of how has culture influence competition in my life, and has it spilled over into my professional space? Absolutely. And I think it's got me to where I'm at in a successful way, I would say. I think that everybody has that kind of healthy dose of competition within them. And I've been fortunate enough to where, I come from a family background where my mother and my father, they've always kind of encouraged us to be strong individuals and not necessarily focus on others, but focus on yourself. And so, oftentimes at work, if I see some sort of, or even just socially, if I see some sort of an injustice, or if I feel as though there has been something that needs to be addressed, my culture has made me the strong person I am today, which is I kind of ask myself, like, okay, like as an Afghan American, I'm not going to stand for that. and whatever that topic may be, it gives me confidence to address that.
And I think you answered this, but as an Afghan American woman, do you feel that competition among women is built into our culture somehow? Do you have some experiences that you can maybe share and how that has made you strong?
Yeah, so I think that it's not specific necessarily to Afghan American culture. I think that it's something that just exists within culture. Again, we go back to, competition. There is some level within all of us. It is an innate quality within all of us. Culturally, I wouldn't necessarily define it to culture, more so I would say gender role specific when I think about it. Okay. So there are times where, in Afghan American culture, you may hear or see where girls are meant to play nice and share and kind of take on this passive role. And so, to kind of turn that into a positive, you want to make sure that you do have a seat at the table. Or if it is in work, or if it is, in your personal life, you don't want to bring someone down. You kind of want to lift them up and have a voice. As females, we're oftentimes so quick to be apologetic or say, I'm sorry. And even myself, I catch myself doing that quite often. I'm really trying to shift that, and I'm working on that to not be as apologetic and be assertive and make sure that that doesn't mean a negative thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you. Sana John, what do you think? How has culture influenced competition in your life? And do you think it's spilled over into your professional space?
Yeah, so before I answer that, if I could just make a comment about John's.
Yes, of course, of course.
The point where he said that we apologize too much as women. One thing that my sister actually brought to my attention was that instead of saying sorry, we can reframe it as saying thank you. Like, I catch myself saying sorry for everything. Like, I apologize for my existence, essentially, you know?
Yeah.
Like, the one thing, like, if I'm at the supermarket and my kids are, you know, making me take a little longer, instead of turning around saying, oh, sorry for taking so long, frame it as thank you for your patience, you know? So then, like, that's one way that's kind of helped me to stop apologizing for everything. But
I think that's amazing. It's a great tip, because
yeah.
I say sorry all the time to everybody. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I think it's just in my vocabulary now.
For no reason. Like, we just say it just because.
For no reason.
But moving along to the question, the Afghan culture has influenced my life when it comes to competition in a positive way, in academics. So for those of you who have parents that went to school in Afghanistan, if you ask them who are the top students in your class, most likely they still remember who they were and might even know their names. I know my parents do. And that's because as a culture, we celebrate academic excellence. And so while we do celebrate and encourage that aspect, we still have to remain humble at the same time. And we can't go around saying, hey, I'm the number one student, you know? And the way this has spilled over into my professional and my academic life equally is that I strive to do my best, to be my best. But because I'm so humble, like, because of like this humility that's built into our culture, when I am praised or acknowledged for my accomplishments, I become unable to just say thank you. And instead, I come up with always saying, oh, it's just easy. Oh, anyone could have done it, you know? And so now now that I realize that it's something that I do, I've become conscious of it. I see myself as remaining humble without undermining my successes. So.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Nai John, can you share some how culture has influenced competition in your life, and if it's spilled over into your professional space?
Yeah, no, both Morvari John and Sana John said it so perfectly, and I'm continuing that basically. I think, as Sana John especially mentioned, academics, I mean, it's اول نمره, everyone in all our parents, ourselves, you're like اول نمره کی بوده. Sorry, the lights, I gotta get this. Who was the best in the class and who did well, and so that really has influenced me as well. I think more towards, you know, getting more education and just doing well. I don't know if that is really a Afghan culture. Then I feel like I see that in a lot of cultures, in a lot of different societies. They value certain things, and then you see everybody is striving to get there, to be there, and yeah.
All right, thank you. Zakia John, what about you? What do you think?
I can relate to a lot of what was shared. I think, especially the example you brought up, Sanajan, about, you know, like being the best at school, right? It's those memes that you see where it's like, I got a B and I'm so excited. And it's the immigrant parent responds with, well, why didn't you get an A? or I get an A minus, it's like, well, why didn't you get an A plus? And so I definitely see and have experienced that. And I also think that like going back to always wanting to be the best in those types of settings, sometimes we laugh about it because I feel like, you know, all of our parents will say they were the first in their class, and it's like there's no one really to validate whether or not that was true. But I'll pivot a little bit more just to kind of share the other side of how culture has influenced competition or shaped competition for me personally. I know growing up it was often like, look at your sister or look at your cousin and, you know, be like them. And so it constantly hearing that and having these people that it's like that is the best form of who you can be, kind of disincentivized competition in a sense, because it's like, well, I already know what my endpoint is, right? I'm not challenging myself to go further than that because it's been defined as like, this is the model that you should be working towards. And like, that's expected for you as someone, you know, growing up in an Afghan American household. And I think it's only that, you know, as I got older, it was like, wait a second, I don't necessarily have to be like that person that they're putting up on a pedestal. And I think someone mentioned this earlier in their responses, when I realized that I wasn't necessarily competing to be like others, but really competing to challenge myself, that my perspective shifted a little bit. And, you know, it's changed kind of how I approach a lot of different situations, both at home and at work. You know, at work, I feel like to me, and this is kind of the influence of what I was mentioning of, you know, I see myself in roles at work when I see people that I can relate to in those roles, right? And so it goes back to that conversation around representation. If I see someone that looks like me and has the same values as me, like 3 positions higher, I'm like, I can see myself in that role one day. But if I've only seen people that I don't relate to whatsoever, it becomes a little bit more challenging to work towards that until I kind of snap out of it and step to the side and be like, well, I can be that person that doesn't necessarily reflect who I am. But that doesn't mean that I can't be in their shoes and maybe approach that role a little bit differently. And so it's been kind of a growth to approach different situations with kind of the cultural values that I was raised with, knowing that sometimes they conflicted or contradicted one another, but you know, it's the best of both worlds.
I like that example, Zakia John, because that whole comparing you to somebody else within your family or a friend, that happened quite a bit in my household as well. And it's funny because I've always said that I don't want to do that to my child, but I do. And because I know that I resented, you know, the person that they would compare me to. You know, I started to kind of distance myself and go, well, there must be something wrong with me if I can't be at their level. I mean, what's wrong with me? I mean, they're so much greater than me. What do they have that I don't have? And so, it's funny that I do that also to my son, and I'm like, well, you know, look at so and so, you know, he does blah 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 blah. Why can't you? But I have to keep reminding myself that, well, you know, I don't want them to, you know, I don't want him to think that he's better than him. But I think in my head, I'm thinking, well, why can't you maybe just learn some of his best practices and so and so? But I don't think you see it like that, especially as a child. So great example. Thank you. Okay, well, we are moving right along. Next question that we have for you all is whether or not you feel that healthy competition exists. Zakia John, I'm going to ask you, do you think that healthy competition exists?
I do. As someone that's super competitive, sometimes I create opportunities to be competitive just for the sake of like getting it out of my system. So like if it's, you know, going to the gym, my cousins and I will send each other like snaps or like an emoji to indicate that we've gone to the gym today as a way to kind of inspire and encourage others to like take up that healthy habit. And it's more so like, I want to go to the gym more than you this week, so I'm going to get up and go there right now. So I do feel like there is a way to be competitive in a healthy manner, so that instead of creating, I think Sana, you mentioned this earlier, instead of creating like self-doubt or you know, exposing your insecurities, it's a way to really inspire you to do better and to be better. And I see this in a lot of my workspaces as well. I think if there's like some sort of competition around working towards the same goal, right? Like ultimate happiness doesn't come from, for me, like you having the best idea to achieve that goal, but really getting to that goal. So it kind of depends on how we approach situations and what we're working towards. But I do feel like there's way to incorporate healthy competition to make life a little bit more fun, in our everyday practices.
I agree. I think it's important to have that healthy competition to make it a little bit more fun. But let me ask you something. I read a few articles around competition before we did this, and when I was reading some of that, they were talking about healthy competition and that it's encouraged in boys, but then it's often seen undesirable for girls. Can you share why you think this is, and maybe some examples of when you've potentially seen this?
Yeah, I think it goes back to something that Morwadi, you had mentioned earlier about kind of gender roles and having very narrow definitions of what a woman does or what a girl does in society, and you wanting to just kind of check that box off and not really stand out because that's not what girls do or that's not what women do. And I feel like there's opportunities, and I think we've seen a lot of shifting of that narrative in different media campaigns and examples. So I really love the like a girl hashtags now, where it's like fight like a girl. That's not something that growing up I had been exposed to, but it's something that's seen more positively of you can be loud and you can be a girl, you can dream crazy and you can be a girl, right? These are things that coexist and they're not mutually exclusive to our gender. But I think the fact that these campaigns exist and they are so intentional is just a response to the fact that, yes, their healthy competition was, I think, discouraged amongst females for a long time. And I think that now there's a tipping point, and we have an opportunity to really, remove that from girls growing up right now, and women kind of growing into themselves and saying that's okay, you can be competitive. And at work, I work a lot on different gender equity initiatives within the city. And one of the things that I focus on is girls in sports. And, we, in the city, it's one of the largest cities, we had 25% of our programs were girls and 75% were boys were enrolled in our programs. And so as we've seen kind of a growth in the number of girls, we've been very intentional in how we're recruiting them, because it's things like playing sports competitively in that more friendly environment. If it's not, league sports, it helps you be more comfortable with competing and with saying I beat someone, right? There's nothing to be ashamed of when you say that if you're not cheating. And so it's kind of building in those opportunities to practice showing off in a sense. And then I say that with quotes, but people are good at things. And I think that we should embrace what we're good at. But also know that just because we're good at something doesn't necessarily mean that we're better than someone else, right? People all approach different situations kind of with their own experience and perspectives. And so long as we can celebrate what we're good at without putting others down, I think that we should continue to embrace this cultural shift of, letting girls be competitive and celebrate their competitiveness and celebrate their achievements, but also supporting one another in that process, so that if you weren't the person that got first place, that's all right too. Right. You can get there.
Love that. Thank you. And John, what do you think about healthy competition?
So I think healthy competition certainly exists and is necessary for our self-growth, because we're only going to play to the level of our competition. And a good example that comes to mind is when a runner, when they're running with someone else, they tend to run a little faster. And if you run with, sometimes I take a sister or something, and then we end up running further. And that's because we're pushing each other. So healthy competition would be if you were to use the successes of others and their achievements to push you to do more, whereas opposed to competing against each other where you're striving to defeat the person and in the midst of it end up destroying yourself. And then in regards to that why are boys more competitive than girls?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to, well, first off, Zakia John knocked it out of the park. You hit a lot of great points. But I think it comes down to our society, that's a patriarchy, and not just the Afghan culture, but the Western culture as a whole. And girls from a young age, our society tells us, like was mentioned before, to be nice, get along, wait there passively, don't compete to change your life or anything, because you're Prince Charming, he's coming, he's going to save you, I mean, that's every princess story, and thankfully Disney's changing that these days. But still, from a young age, boys are encouraged, for example, to play with competitive toys like sports balls and race cars, whereas girls are targeted by advertisements for passive toys like playing with teacups, baby strollers, princesses, and lip gloss, right? And then boys are praised for their strength and their speed, and girls are praised for being kind. And then boys are told to compete and to achieve, while girls are to just sit there and dream. And I think even the prospect of a girl competing is ridiculed in the comments that we make to our sons, like, oh, you run like a girl, or you play like a girl, or you threw that ball like a girl, So like Zakia Jan mentioned, that now there are these different initiatives to try to change that narrative. But at the end of the day, that's still there, and there still needs to be a lot more work. And as long as these things aren't changed within our society, girls are going to continue to be less competitive than their male counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Those are really good points. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What about you, John? What do you think about healthy competition?
I agree with you. I think Sana John and Zakia John, I think they summarized it really well. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't really add anything more to it, because I think they captured it quite nicely.
Captured everything. Anything about the have around boys being encouraged? And I know you said a little bit earlier about that,
mm-hmm.
But do you have anything to add around that?
Yeah, I think we've all kind of seen it. And it's interesting because when I was even researching this topic of, female competition, so much of the narrative is kind of formulated by this competition amongst women for a male's attention. And, that really kind of bothers me, because it's not necessarily about, that's kind of like putting a male on some sort of a pedestal. And so I think not that, I think that there's, again, there could be that competition that exists, but ultimately at the end of the day, that competition is coming from within yourself. And so why it's happening, I think that's something key to focus on. And again, if you surround yourself with positive people who uplift you, male and female, I don't think I would be as successful as I am today without the encouragement of my male and female counterparts. And so we're very fortunate to live in the times that we do now, where we're also reshifting the perspective. And, Sana John and Zakia John touched on the perspective changing, even from an advertisement sense. That I love that Nike ad where like a girl is now something so positive, So that's pretty much what I have to add. Competition can be healthy. It just can't be at the disadvantage of somebody else, if that makes sense.
I agree. And it's the sports aspect of it, the whole children's sports and whatnot, and there's sports for girls, and then we've got sports for boys and whatnot. But I am really excited as things are changing. I'm starting to see girls in football now, and so you see them with their little helmets and stuff and competing with these with these big boys. But I think as we're evolving, we're kind of seeing this new shift, and it's really great to be able to see that. So anyway, thank you for sharing that. Our final question, and I'm going to ask all of you to answer this one, but can you all give us some tips we can share on overcoming our own internal challenges, our instincts connected to unhealthy competition, maybe that voice in your head that might belittle other successes, accomplishments out of fear? Can you give us some examples, and really any type of tip or anything that you may have for those out there that could help them who may share the same type of competition or that you all have had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Morwadi, John, can I start with you?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, whether it's like personally or professionally, you're feeling this competition. I think that if it kind of identify where it comes from, if it stems from some sort of an insecurity, or you feel like you're belittling yourself, I think one thing to do is make sure that you're easy on yourself, and then kind of turn this into a positive, which is how can focus on yourself and how you can be a better person. So how do you take yourself to the next level and almost create that healthy competition within yourself? And I think a tool to use that is to kind of shift your perspective, and think of your mindset from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. And what I mean by that, I can give you an example of the professional level. If you think from a perspective of abundance, there's room for all of us to shine. There's room for all of us to grow, so we can encourage and uplift one another, versus if we look at it from a place of scarcity, you think, okay, there's not enough room there, or there's not enough positions. And so I'm going to kind of claw my way to the top. So it's really, again, shifting that perspective and shifting it towards that perspective of abundance, where find your seat at the table. And if you can't find your seat, make room for yourself there. And, kind of tied to that, as women, we need to support one another. And I see so much of that now, and I love it. I think that, empowering others can be a very fulfilling feeling, and it's far more great than feeling, this unhealthy level of competition. And I think it's very important for us to help each other because, let's face it, we have enough stuff to deal with as it is.
Yeah, that's the truth. Definitely. Sana John, can you give some tips on that you want to share around competition and potentially overcoming it?
Mashallah, John really answered that fully. The only thing that I would add to it is that getting to know your internal voice. And there was a TED Talk that I had listened to at one point where the speaker asked the audience that, do you speak kinder to others than your internal voice speaks to yourself? And that really struck a chord with myself. And then we have to use our internal voice to uplift us rather than bringing us down. And then once we get to know our internal voice, then we can kind of pinpoint our insecurities also, and we can address those. And oftentimes when people do bring other people down for their successes or belittle it, it's because of their own insecurities. So we have to be able to address our insecurities, face them head on, and then we'll be able to find inspiration within others' successes, and then that'll help us push us along to achieve more, inshallah.
Thank you. Zakia John.
I think that both Marwarid and Sana provided some really great thoughts. Just to add to that, I think one tip that I try to be super intentional about is just celebrating others. And I feel like, when I'm able to do that and recognize like someone has done something amazing and, I'm inspired by it, I try to let them know and let them know that what they did was a big deal. And I think that by doing that, it helps me also be more confident in what I'm doing, because I recognize that, like I too can celebrate myself, because it's easier for me to say good job to someone else, and I'm my own harshest critic, and it's a little bit harder for me to say that when I'm reflecting internally. So the more I celebrate others, the easier it becomes for me to also celebrate myself. And in that situation, I think I can also approach more competitive environments with more self-confidence, right? Because I know that I too can work towards something, and I may not hit my goal the first time around, but I think that I've work towards building that self-confidence where I'm like, okay, maybe it's not the first time, or maybe not the first 3 times, but eventually I'll get to where I'm trying to go. So that would be my tip.
That's a great tip. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Nai John.
Yeah, I mean, they all put it so beautifully. I think first we need to really look into what is competition, and what is healthy competition, and what is unhealthy competition. I think there is a term called hyper competitiveness, and that is sort of a negative term when people are kind of going against people rather than with them, and then that obviously can create tension, can create just a lot of stress, not only for the person but for the people around them, regardless of what they are competing on. And then there is healthy competition, where we can become better, we can thrive for more, we can strive for more, and it can be a mean to develop ourselves further. And so that is healthy competition. Again, really wonderful examples were given. And just kind of looking within, reflecting internally, and understanding when I'm competing, if it's a job, if it's to look a certain way, if it's to have a different level of education, whatever it is it something that we really, is it coming from the outside, the pressure that is on us from other people, us trying to become that perfect woman, that, with high standards and so on and so forth? Or is it something that we really want to do? It's for our improvement. It's for our development. And so if it's the latter, then who says not to do it? We can compete, maybe not with others, but with ourselves, and say, well, I'm going to give education as an example. I have, let's say, a bachelor's. I really want to get a master's. Is it because I really appreciate going back to school? I like studying. I like being in that academic environment. Or is it because so-and-so has a master's degree, and even though I hate to go back to school, I'm just going to go to show them, right? And ultimately, I read this in an article that said when women are competing, they're not really competing against others, but more against themselves. Like you always see that more educated, or that prettier, or smarter, or whatever it is, a version of yourself in somebody else. And so then you're basically competing for that, and that can become unhealthy, because there is always a cap on how much a person can do and their capacity. So again, I think my only advice would be to really reflect within and be mindful and see where those feelings of competitiveness are coming from. Yeah.
I everything you said, it was soaking in like a sponge, because I feel like a lot of that competition makes you sick too. I need to go get this thing because this person has it. I need to go get this education because this person has it. I need to go, my child needs to look like this because that person's child is like that. I feel like a lot of the stress in, either women or men, whomever, is because of this whole competition. So thank you for the tips that you gave, because I think a lot of us deal with that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I just want to add another thing, with how women look, right? A certain size, weight, waist size, and all of that. A lot of eating disorders. I mean, there is much more to eating disorders than just competing, but just competitiveness, unhealthy competitiveness, that is a part of it. And it gets, if you look at it, I mean, we all were born with certain body types, and not everyone can truly be a size 0 or a size 2 because their physiques does not allow them to be. And it doesn't mean that they're not healthy. But our media and just that, I need to be a certain size because so-and-so is, and, it can really add to more serious issues like eating disorder. But again, that much more goes into eating disorder than just competitiveness, but this is a small part of it too.
But it's a piece of the puzzle that could potentially get you to that, along with a lot of other stresses that
Exactly.
we have.
Absolutely.
Right? So, yeah, no, great points. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have anything to share around this type of competition? I feel like John brought a great point up around, competition that's built in, looking a certain way or whatnot. Do you think that has, our culture and women and, is that built in somehow? Does anyone have anything to share around that? No?
I guess I'll jump in here.
Okay.
But, I think that our culture certainly has something to do with that. Afghans, as a culture, we are very competitive, and we do compare a lot. As was mentioned before, we compare, our kids to their siblings and to their cousins, and it was done to us when we were younger also, and it continues to be done by our parents. But I think that women have more of a negative experience with it, where it's faces at a heightened level because of, again, the patriarchy in the society. And so a lot of things that, like, for example, our beauty is compared on a basis of how attractive we are in the eyes of a potential male suitor. And then once we become mothers, then it's all around, like a man, he could just go and work and it's fine, it's acceptable. But as a woman, if we decide, hey, I'm going to have a career, then where compared to other women, where it said that you're too American and you're neglectful of your husband and your children. But then if you decide that I'm going to stay home and raise my kids, then you're unambitious and you're a freeloader, And I think that this is all because at its core, our culture revolves around the man and thus places women in a constant competition in a pursuit to please the man. But then with that all being said, I am energized by conversations like this that's providing a generational shift to break this cycle within the community and bring the sisterhood together for us to, rise together and accept whichever route we take and whichever way we look, because again, we're all beautiful in every which way. And, we should work as a team to inspire each other instead of try to one up the other.
Thank you. That's a great way to put it. I love that you said that this is being able to do things like this, hopefully will inspire others and learning from each other and understanding and educating, because I think it's all about being, able to educate each other on certain things. So thank you for that.
I wanted to also add to that, as Sanajan mentioned, yes, we see that in our culture, but I think that's across all cultures, especially when it comes to women, how they look, what they do, and their standards. And to also, I think this is really important for everyone, for all of us, to really pat ourselves on the shoulders as well. And to say, hey, you did a really good job. I think especially women, if we gave ourselves enough credit for the things that we have done and we have achieved, that it would put us in a more healthier cycle than, just kind of looking out and see what everybody else is doing, because I bet you every single person has done a lot. If only they took the time to look at it and to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, is there anything else anyone would like to say? If not, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Really appreciate the time that you took to talk about your experiences and to share best, practices and to educate us on, learnings that you all had. I think that this was a great panel. I think that we all learned a lot from the four of you, and I truly appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.